What true crime case do you find most disturbing? The sad case of Sylvia Likens. She went to live with a family who raped, beat and tortured her to death over several months. The whole family was involved all the way from the mother down to the youngest kids. The neighbors knew and said nothing. One from my country, the Pamar family. It was never confirmed it was a crime, but many people think so to this day. A family, husband, wife and children, went out on holiday by car and they all disappeared. Police say they can't find the car though they've searched and searched. Then they start connecting the father to some drug ring in the media, then to a psych disorder or cult, then even to UFOs. Finally, the whole family is found about a month later, dead and rotting. Their car crashed literally on the only curve of the route they were taking, a place so obvious that policemen had sworn they had checked it multiple times. So far, this seems yet like another case of police incompetence. But then it comes out that multiple people traveling in buses had seen the car and called 911, yet nothing was done. A police chief says he found them on a hunch, but it also comes out that a poor local man was the one who found them and then he had to go into hiding. So now most people think they were hit by a police car, or there was some other dirty thing going on. But the worst part is that, after the forensic analysis, it turned out that the mother was alive and conscious for a longer time. She even tried to crawl to where her husband was. I pray she wasn't conscious for long, because I simply can't imagine dying like that. So we had a whole family dying, rotting there merely meters away from the road, while police forces ridiculed them all on national TV for a month. I can't remember the names of the people. But this guy befriended this girl all through middle and high school. Was a regular visitor to her house. When he went off to college, she was still in high school. Turns out he was a budding serial killer. So he left college to start killing. Went back to her house. Waited for her parents to leave, then raped and murdered her in her own bed, where her mom later found her body. Then he showed up later to the house to grieve with the family. There are so many, but I will say the cases of Michelle Avila, Shanda Sharer, and Skylar Nees haunt me the most. All three cases involved their best friends turning against them due to jealousy, love, and falling out. Michelle died because her friends thought that she was taking her boyfriends from them. One of the killers even lived with the victim's family, while the other was obsessed with Michelle after killing her. Both killers were released from jail in 2011 and 2012 after serving 22 to 23 years. The sad fact is that one of the killers had been best friends with her since first grade. All of this over a boy. Shanda was killed in 1992 by 4 other teen girls from 15 to 17 due to her loving the girlfriend of the mastermind. She was abducted and tortured for hours before being lit of fire from gasoline. The sad part about this is that Shanda was 12 years old at the time of her death, and this case even got international attention because of how brutal it was. Skylar and the murderers both worked together at their jobs before her death. They had a falling out, which usually happens with everyone. Both of the perpetrators had planned for Skylar's death just because they did not like her at all. They stabbed her to death behind her back, which makes it worse when Skylar fought for her life. Out of all 3 cases, Shanda Sharer's case was the worst because I can never imagine what Shanda had to go through all that pain alive before being burnt to death. The death of Cassandra Cantrell. I was friends with the guy that allegedly murdered her. We played D&D for 7 years, in the same basement. He supposedly killed her in less than a week after he did it. The trial date keeps getting pushed back. I wish it would get underway after a year and a half so her family has closure. The Jimmy Savile case hands down. Molested children for decades, but had the police and BBC higher-ups covering it up cause he was a huge star. Some examples that come to mind. Asterisk had the keys to a hospital for terminally ill kids. He'd let himself in to do what he want, when he wanted. Any staff who tried to report it were fired. Asterisk once, at least, possibly more, let himself into a morgue, and I'm sure you can imagine what happened. Asterisk molested a girl, possibly a niece, at a party at her home. JonBenet Ramsey was about my age. I grew up hearing about what happened to her from my mother, and her case, along with Adam Walsh's, had a huge influence on how I was raised. Columbine. I was in school when this happened, and it had a profound impact on almost everything about my life. Listening to Marilyn Manson and wearing a trench coat, for example, were no longer normal kid things, but warning signs of something much darker. Active shooter drills became a normal part of school life. Matthew Hoffman, ex-tree trimmer who murdered 2, kidnapped and raped 1, and tried to hide her in his basement as his pet. Had an obsession with leaves. The walls in his house were stuffed with bags and bags and bags of leaves. A room in his house featured a 4 feet plus tall pile of leaves with nothing else. He stuffed the bodies into a hollowed-out tree and begged authorities not to remove them. The pictures of the leaves in his house, everything else, just looks so barren, and then there's this room with nothing but leaves. It's unnerving. The girl he kidnapped was eventually rescued and sent to live with other relatives who ended up being physically abusive to her. I hope her life gets better. Baby Brianna. Absolutely horrifying, and the extended family's actions show they are just as shitty as her parents. It's just inconceivable to me that people can be such monsters. Susan Smith, she had no reason to ever do what she did to those poor kids and deserves every second of prison. Maddie Clifton, murdered and stuffed under her 14-year-old's neighbor's mattress for several days. James Bulger was another awful one, just any with kids will sear into my brain. These are some of the worst ones though. The one about the Mexican sisters, who would promise girls as young as 12 work as servants in the city, then they would get raped by a group of men that traveled with them before they would be put as prostitutes in their whorehouse. Most of them were killed when they started to get old as in their late 20s. If they became pregnant, they would have the child, but if it was a boy it was killed on sight. If it was a girl they would be raised in captivity till they were 12 years old, then they would be offered as prostitutes. I listened to it on a podcast coming back from Myrtle Beach a few years back. It messed me up for a couple days after listening to it. Listened to and watched the entire interrogation of Alyssa Bustamante from a YouTube channel called Explore With Us. Ever since listening to it, I literally cannot stop thinking about it. It's so brutal. So sad. Thinking of a 15-year-old girl who's the same exact age as me, brutally killing a 9-year-old girl who was definitely just hanging out with the 15-year-old because she thought she was cool because she was older. Makes me so sad. It pops into my head every 5 minutes or so, and I watched the interrogation like a month ago now. I wish I could just stop thinking about it. There's also a case where with teen killed his 4-year-old sister with a kitchen knife by stabbing her in the throat a bunch of times to save her from sexual abuse she was suffering. So disgusting. Makes me so fucking sad. I don't understand how people can do these things to each other. I have actually seen live in action when I was 8, my mom being pregnant in 4th month and my stepdad not wanting to have another kid, but as a good Christian, he refused to use contraception and forced my mom to do the same. The day came when they fought once again about having the kid or not. It escalated quickly after I was locked in the empty but freezing cold fridge by my stepdad again. I knew it was worse than the times before. I started to hear beating and glass shattering outside for 2 to 3 minutes, then one last final scream in pain of my mom, and then finally silence. This asshole of a wannabe Christian unlocked the fridge and showed my mom's corpse to me, and said that is what happened when you don't follow the rules of him, or the ones of God. 9 days. I never left the house, and he desperately tried to get rid of the corpse. During this time, when he tried to find a place to bury her, I somehow escaped my hand and foot cuffs at 1 a.m. and ran the fastest and most relieving run of my life. I tried to make as much noise and draw maximum attention until some guy yelled at me to STFU. I replied with the words, "My mom is dead and my stepdad is gone with her." End of the story. The cops came a few minutes after I told this guy I still don't think if I had the permission to wash myself and if I didn't have her blood still on my clothes and body, he would have never believed me. Stepdad came back home without the corpse, got arrested on the spot, and received 4 lifetime sentences. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more videos like this one.